Hi, my name is Richard Anderson. I'm Commercial Director here at Evolve Assess. In this series of videos, I'm honoured to be talking to some industry experts around the topics of business, HR and HR tech, and of course assessment. Hopefully you find these discussions enjoyable and insightful, and if you have any feedback or questions, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching.
So I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by Martin Mason. So Martin is, or most recently has been Global Head of Talent and Performance and Inclusion as well at The Body Shop. And despite all of the experience and knowledge he's got within talent management, he's also now a successful entrepreneur in his own right. So he's now CEO and founder of Unleashed and an all-round great guy. So Martin, thanks ever so much for making the time. How are you doing?
Oh, pleasure. Thank you. No, really good. Thank you. Really, really good. How about you?
Really, yeah, all good. Thanks. Yeah, full of busy, crazy busy actually at the minute. What about you?
Yeah,
very no doubt. You always are. Great stuff. So you know, before we started recording, I had a quick chat with you about one of the things that we're trying to do at Evolve is to put out some more video-based content around topics that we've got interest in. You know, not just personally as a business, but we think that our network will. Obviously, one of those is assessment, technology, but HR is a big thing that we have. We have a big interest in. And I guess one of the topics that we keep hearing more and more about is diversity and inclusion. And you know, I know there's something you're incredibly passionate about, that you've got a huge amount of knowledge on. And I thought, well, who better to have a discussion with than the expert himself around diversity and inclusion? So it's, you know, just an initial conversation, Martin, kind of starting at the basics, I guess, around that particular topic. But I guess before we maybe get into the nuts and bolts of that, would you mind just giving a bit of info and a bit of background about kind of who you are, what you've done, and I guess how Unleashed and why Unleashed was formed?
Yeah, of course. So I guess just to kind of start with, so Unleashed as a business, our kind of sole purpose is to, as the name would suggest, to unleash people's potential. So we've got a deep-rooted belief that everybody is talent, but you know, everyone will apply that talent differently. And kind of our business ethos is about putting tools and services and products out there to help remove some of the barriers that exist for entry into the workplace, some of the barriers that people might experience in the workplace, and how we can support, develop, and foster kind of inclusive cultures in business. It's a very personal thing for me. So so prior to founding Unleashed last year, I worked in corporates from a very young age. So I started at 15. So worked for coming up for 17 years in different organizations, very different sectors, very different experiences, anything from kind of the nice glossy side of retail with the Body Shop through to the more grittier businesses like Halfords and Wolseley, which is a plumbing and heating merchant. So you can imagine kind of the cultural differences between the brands. And interestingly, diversity and inclusion has become a formal part of my work and my role over the last, I'd say, probably decade. But prior to that, it was very much instinctive but informal. So I always could see some of the barriers that individuals faced in organisations. So in my early days working in corporate, there were incredibly male-dominated cultures. You would be very, you know, I used to hear kind of passive comments all the time about, you know, kind of a woman's place and some of the kind of stereotypes around gender. Particularly the same with ethnicity. And I mean, I'm an openly gay man now, but it was something I really wrestled with in my formative years. So kind of growing up in a small mining town, you know, you can imagine kind of culturally some of the challenges that existed there. And whilst, you know, I've been very fortunate and I've been able to overcome a number of different barriers in organisations and work through, I know lots of other people that have struggled, and it's got nothing to do with their talent or ability or skill. It's often to do with a characteristic, whether it's their gender or their sexual orientation or their ethnicity. And it was something that always used to infuriate me. So in corporate, I used to kind of act as a Trojan horse, going in under the guise of learning and development or talent and starting to change some of the infrastructure subtly in the background to enable people to come up through the organisation or to attract more diverse talent in. And it was never a public kind of declaration or something we did formally at the time, but it was a way of kind of influencing hearts and minds at senior levels to show, once we brought in a diverse talent set, what the potential could be and what we could deliver. And probably in more recent years where it's become kind of more socially accepted and D&I is talked about a lot more now, it's been really nice to be able to work with kind of charities and organisations and individuals to support them and help them to grow within businesses. So yeah, probably a bit of a waffly answer to the question, but hopefully gives you a bit of an overview.
It gives a perfect insight. It's really interesting, and I guess so. Some of those challenges that you saw firsthand and you observed others having and obstacles in very different businesses but big corporates. Did they emanate from something very specific? So was it a cultural thing? Was it senior leadership? Was it because of society? Was that was just the way things were in the workplace? Or was it a mixture?
I think it was a mixture, and it's interesting how much all of these different areas are linked. So having done more and more research on it in the last few years, where I've kind of had more time to do that coming out of corporate, it's interesting how much kind of the organisation, the societal view, and kind of the individual views in certain parts of the world are so heavily linked, and how one influences the other. I think, without kind of going too deep into psychology, we're naturally quite tribal. We have this kind of innate need for psychological safety, and I think COVID's probably highlighted that a lot over the last year. And you can see how unsettled everyone's been because there's been such drastic change. It brings out the best and the worst in people, and that's a very extreme example, but the same exists in organisations, and everyone has this kind of innate need when they join an organisation to want to fit in, to be part of something rather than to stand out necessarily. And all the kind of frameworks, all the cultural stuff that we do in organisations supports that. We don't want people to come in and necessarily be disruptive in a lot of organisations. We want people that are like us to come in and work with us. And you see it all over the place in recruitment stuff, and the way that we talk about roles of, we want people to be a team player, we want people to be a culture fit, we want people to work collaboratively with others. All of these are just kind of different paraphrases of saying we want people to be like us and that we can get on with and have fun with. And I suppose there's a nice element to that of we end up having a really cordial work environment with people like us. The flip side of that is we're seeing in organisations now this need for innovation and market disruption, and to do that you need diversity of thought, and you're not going to get that if you keep having lots of people around you that are exactly the same.
Yeah, and it's not just obviously a nice thing to have that people are talking about. We're talking about, from a business perspective, it is affecting the bottom line now. The more diverse organisations are more profitable, the more productive. That's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a really specific example that I know they won't mind me sharing. So if you think about, so good example would be the beauty industry at the moment. If you look at a lot of the leading organisations in that area, the makeup of their senior teams are, by and large, predominantly white people. Yeah. Now, one of the reasons that Rihanna's Fenty business has been so phenomenally successful and it's gone into like a multi-billion pound business in a very short window is because she's tapped into a market of, the makeup does not cater to different skin tones. None of the leading brands addressed that because it wasn't something they thought of, because it wasn't a problem that they experienced. Yeah. She's identified a niche in the market, and therefore has grown a ridiculously successful business, which is great, and every credit to her for it. But this is a real example of having that diversity of thought around the senior table. If you haven't got people with those lived experiences that know the kind of products or services that people in those communities need, you're going to miss out on massive commercial opportunities.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's really interesting stuff. And I guess maybe for the next question, just to kind of go back a step or two and maybe start with the basics. So, diversity and inclusion. Obviously, the terms get banded together. It's D&I, it's I&D. But they mean slightly different things. Is that fair to say? So it was just to maybe So would you mind just giving a bit of what is diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, diversity is around difference. So this is about having representation of different characteristics, cultures, beliefs. So having for example, a diverse workforce would consist of multiple people with lots of differing characteristics, views, opinions, beliefs. Inclusion is almost the the antithesis of that, where you're talking about bringing people together and creating an environment where people feel they belong. So the nirvana point, I guess, is to have, you want a diverse set of people in an inclusive workforce, so everyone can be themselves and have their own, unique talents, beliefs, opinions, views, ideas, but in a way that is respectful of each other. So everyone can, feel safe being themselves at work, offering that point of difference.
Fantastic. Really well. There you go. You've heard it from the horse's mouth. Fantastic. No, it does mean when you say it like that, because I've done a little bit of research into the topic, and you seem to get kind of different viewpoints, but that completely makes sense. So when you talked before about being tribal, and there's, I guess, I don't know if you said it specifically, but I know that there's this concept of unconscious bias that exists, and that's not because anybody's a bad person. It just, unconscious bias happens because we're human beings. That happens as part of right at the beginning, as part of that recruitment process. So, have you got any, I guess, if businesses are wanting to become more inclusive, if businesses are wanting to become more diverse, starting right at the beginning in terms of recruitment, are there any top tips that you'd really recommend, Martin, to achieve those things?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things, so there's lots of terms that get bandied around this at the moment, and unconscious bias seems to be kind of almost on the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah,
I do think there is a place for unconscious bias, but what we subscribe to is slightly different. So I think what's happened unintentionally is, with unconscious bias, people are aware that everyone has it. It's then become a license to go, well, everyone's biased. I'm not wrong because I'm biased. Therefore, everyone needs to accept that. I think for us, we focus on kind of like conscious inclusion, like taking steps to make sure that we are proactively making good and ethical decisions around what we do. So with recruitment in particular, removing some of the barriers to entry that exist. And by that, I mean, if you look on most job descriptions, it will use words like I've just talked about. We want somebody that's going to hit the ground running, that's going to, be a team player, be collaborative, be, one of us, one of the family, one of the team. All of these phrases subliminally are sending a message of, if you don't fit into this crowd, you're not going to do well here. So being really careful about the language in job descriptions makes a massive difference. There's a huge undertaking that's gone on with Harvard University, where they've done research into the psychology of language and been able to pinpoint the fact that even with ethnicity, with gender, it will detract certain populations from applying if they see certain words or language in job descriptions. And there are some really good tools out there that you can use to scan your stuff to find out where some of these words are that are inhibitors. So you've got free versions like Total Jobs Gender Decoder, or things like Textio exist. So the software that you can use to tackle that. I think one of the other big wins is to think about what you actually need for the role. So often when I speak to leaders in business and I'll say, right, talk to me about what would the dream person come in and do for you in this job. And when you pinpoint down what the skills look like, take, for example, a leadership role, they'll say, well, they need to be adaptable. They've got to be, good decision makers. I need them to have good emotional intelligence to lead their team. I need them to be able to solve problems for me. And it's like, amazing. So if we can find you somebody that can do all of these things, you'll be happy. Absolutely. And then when you see the job advert, it'll say, must have 10 years experience in leadership role, must have a 2-1 degree in absolutely anything. We don't even care what it is. And so when I then hold that back up to them to say, you asked for this, but you're advertising this, there's a discrepancy here. Why aren't we advertising what you asked for? Often there's no answer to be met with other than, but that's what we've always done. And we found with some of our clients where we've taken some of those example barriers of education or experience out and said, we just want people that can demonstrate that can do a good job in these areas. We've seen far more diverse applications come through.
Oh, that's fantastic. And how does that I guess apply, Martin, to smaller organizations? I know typically you'll work with corporates, your backgrounds being large corporate organizations. Incidentally, mine's been the complete opposite. So I've only ever really worked for either startups or very small businesses and I wrote just to digress slightly, but I wrote a blog fairly recently around cultural fit and what is cultural fit and why do we recruit for cultures and how do you do that? And it's a very kind of subjective area or topic. But one of the things that I've got a slight problem with, particularly in small business, is recruiting somebody. I guess it's a level of unconscious bias, but recruiting somebody based on, I could see myself having a beer with this person after work, that type of thing. And it's nonsense, a lot of it, and it's but I guess how does it typically work when you are a small business and you have maybe 2 or 3 staff? And generally what happens is the founders will recruit, I'm not saying so much people like themselves, but people who they might know, and that's not always the best thing. And is there a way for small businesses to get involved with this as well? So small businesses that might not have those job descriptions fully written and all that sort of stuff. So do you work with many kind of small organizations as well?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we're working with people at both ends of the spectrum. So we're working with, really small charities and startups through to big, large organizations. What we tend to do is leverage some of the benefits of the stuff we've learned from corporates and give them to the startups and the smaller organizations who don't have the money and the infrastructure to do that. I think with that, in some ways, I'd argue it's almost easier because as a startup, you are in control of all of it. You especially if you're a CEO of a business or a manager of a business with a handful of people in there, a bit like us, then you are responsible for recruitment, for development, for the culture in that business. It all rests with you, and so you can make really conscious decisions. I think if you're even using free tools like I just talked about for job descriptions, you're just scanning it. It's simple things like that make a difference. The other one I would question is, I often question myself now, and it's a habit I've had to form over years. And I used to be somebody who recruited people that I felt comfortable with years ago. So if I look around at my old teams, they would have been probably mirror images of me or like me. Now I actively seek out people that are different. So I will look, we're in recruitment mode at the moment. And I was sat the other day looking around the people we work with. And we're a team of, 5-6 people, but we are genuinely very diverse as a group. And with the people I'm about to bring in, as well as looking for the skills, I'm looking for people that can bring a different perspective. So if somebody can say to me in the interview, this is what I can bring that's unique to you that you don't currently have, that's what I want, because I want a different point of view, someone that's going to challenge my thinking and say, but we haven't thought about this over here. Why have we not thought about that? Or you're going to totally alienate this market if we do that. And so just, subtle questions in the interview process of, what's different about you, or what's your unique, cultural perspective that you can bring to this business. It's amazing how good some of the conversations are around that in the interview process.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like I say, I've only got kind of small business really to talk about firsthand in terms of my experience, but I've seen it firsthand as well. And we all know the stats around small businesses and 18 months and 5 years, and how many businesses get past that. And if you're recruiting mirror images of yourself as a CEO, for example, of the first couple of directors, then at some point you're going to butt heads. At some point you're going to reach the end of the road that you can get to. Plus, it's not as enriching in terms of work environment and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, I completely agree and buy in everything you're saying. So. And when it comes to, I guess, so we've recruited, we've got great staff on board. What about development? Because I think statistically, senior leadership is still, the percentage of the BAME population in senior leadership is not where it should be. But we're definitely, are we getting better, Martin? Is it fair?
Marginally. And it very much depends on the sector and the organisation. I think one of the good things that's happened in the last couple of years is there's, the societal pressure now on businesses about what are they doing to tackle this has improved significantly. So I think businesses that previously would have kind of dusted it under the carpet with a 10-year target and gone, in the next 10 years we'll do this, when the new board's in position and we don't have to worry about it. Are now having their feet held to the fire of, okay, but what are we doing to make sure that there is representation? And also, I think there's this kind of view that it's just about the makeup of senior teams. When I've been speaking to global organisations, say, well, I don't have a vacancy right now, or, it's not as easy to just go out and recruit somebody. I'm like, okay, that's brilliant. We don't always have to have a permanent solution, but in your interview process now, is there anybody that's helping you to recruit the new people coming in that is different to you? So is there anybody in your network that you could bring in on the interview panel that's of a completely different demographic that might offer a different perspective? And they're like, oh, and I was like, could you not buddy up? So especially in small businesses, what's stopping us to, network and interview together to offer a different perspective? It's very low risk, it's low cost, but it's practical. And I think it's just about thinking of really simple, cheap, pragmatic ways of tackling some of these challenges that business leaders get hung up on of, oh, it means I've got to completely redesign my C-suite. No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And some of the tools that you guys are using as well have been, designed obviously to mitigate that level of bias, make things a bit more objective. As far as development's concerned of these individuals, would you mind talking just through how that works and what you've been doing there?
Yeah, of course. So it started very much as a passion project for me. We developed a tool called You Unleashed about 18 months ago now, or certainly the blueprints of it were designed about 18 months ago. And it was very much around helping to look at the person as a whole. So how do you identify what someone's potential is, what their emotional intelligence is, how quickly they're going to learn, how good they are at problem solving to support exactly this of if we recruit or onboard somebody into the business, where are they really great? What are they going to just hit the ground running, doing really well? And also, where are they going to need support and development? And incidentally, we've just run a leadership program with well-known brands in the last probably the last sort of 6 to 9 months, where we've taken them through these profiles. We've been able to identify where they've got strengths or development gaps around some of these areas and helped support them with training to improve that with their teams. So one of the teams was really struggling to recruit female candidates into roles, and it was a predominantly male team. When we started to look at their emotional intelligence and some of the areas around development, we saw some themes and some gaps around how they interact with different people. So we did some work around communication with them, getting them to think about empathy and different scenarios they might face. And they then came back to say we've had very different conversations with our people on the back of this, and actually people are starting to feel more supportive and encouraged. And then on the second cohort we ended up doing, there was 2 female regional managers on there, whereas it had been all male the time before. So even just these, practical steps of having, doing some analysis around a report, having some good conversations and training make massive differences culturally in businesses.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like it. And as far as because obviously you're using the tool, and in terms of consultancy, so you working with senior leadership in those types of organizations, the HR teams, who do you typically work with?
Yeah, so a lot of our work, so in terms of our consultancy work, we tend to do a lot of work with boards, with C-suite, with kind of HR and talent leaders in different organizations. In terms of the training that we do, we would do it with that level, but we're also doing a lot more now with kind of frontline leaders, people on kind of the shop floor, the front-facing colleagues. And we're finding that the themes are very consistent all the way through the organisation. Everyone is just a person, and everyone is struggling with exactly this of, what can I say? How's best to operate? How self-aware am I? All of these things. It's just packaged differently, but fundamentally, everybody is, a human being with the same types of needs and wants and desires, I guess.
Yeah. And do you enjoy working with? I guess ironically, but do you enjoy working with diverse types of businesses as well, like lots of different projects? I would imagine you're the type of person that likes to get involved in lots of different types of things.
Exactly. I mean, like our customer base is like most varied and eclectic with people. So we're working with everyone from kind of charities who are like very specialist charities in either healthcare or mental health, through to pharmaceuticals. We've got IT companies that we're working with that are like super pacey, very innovative, very fast, cutting edge. Retail businesses. It's the most eclectic mix of people, but I thoroughly enjoy it because we've done recent networking events with some of them and got the leaders from each of these businesses to come onto calls, and they've all learned so much from each other. But actually, when you peel back some of the layers, some of the problems they're all facing are very similar, even though the sectors are very different. So yeah, it's definitely
it's nice. It's nice to connect those guys as well as yourself, though, isn't it? It's putting those types of people together. And tell us a bit more about that network that you've got.
Yeah, so we established a network called The Arena last year, and it wasn't a planned thing initially. It was, a lot of people were facing difficulty on the back of COVID. There were so many people that were facing pressure in the HR community and leadership roles, that were reaching out to us and saying, look, we need help or we need support. And we knew that we on our own couldn't provide the level of support that they needed individually. So we formed the Arena Network as a way of connecting people with common problems and challenges to help them, work through it as a collective. So if they've got D&I troubles in their business, if they've got talent challenges, we were able to identify the people that have got common challenges or problems, put them together in like project teams and let them work through, with some help and facilitation from us, work through some of those challenges. And we've seen over the last year, kind of our membership has trebled, and it's a really lovely community of people that all just genuinely want to do good stuff, which is really nice to see.
That's fantastic. And if anybody was looking to join the network, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so you can join via our website, which is thearenanetwork.com. And there's also, if that becomes difficult to type, we've also got a link through our own website on unleashed.org.uk. So people can join and become members via that.
Fantastic. And presumably that'll be the same if they want to get in touch with yourself to discuss any of the wider Unleashed offering regarding, all the different types of things that you do by the website.
So our total offer is on our website at unleashed.org.uk, and there's a contact us form on there. So that'll come straight through to the team. And if anyone wants any help or advice, we're on hand to kind of help with anything that we can be useful with.
Brilliant. And I'll put all the links, Martin, as well, because this video should be embedded within probably a blog post. So I'll have all the links for everybody to access if they want to do so. But really, really appreciate that discussion. Really interesting stuff, Martin. It's a pleasure always, as it always is, to speak to you. And I'm glad things are going so well. Really interesting topic as well. And hopefully people will find this of interest. So thanks ever so much, Martin. Really appreciate it.